So let's talk about dynamic range. Now, if you don't know, in cameras, dynamic range refers to how much information the camera can capture between the brightest point and the darkest point of the image. A good camera, like an Arri Alexa, can often capture anywhere from 13 to 17 stops of dynamic range. That's approaching how much dynamic range we can see with our eyes. What that means is if you're in a dark cave and you're looking out into the sunshine, you can still see detail inside that dark cave, and you can see detail in the sky outside. Now, with most cameras, you'll have to choose one or the other. You can either see what's inside the cave and the light outside will just be blown out and you won't be able to see any detail, or you can see the light outside and everything in the cave will just appear black. So I'd never really thought about this beyond the scope of camera sensors. But one day I heard someone talking about it in terms of music, and they said that music should have a high dynamic range in the volume. And I'd never really thought about it before, but it seems really obvious once you do. A lot of great songs have a high dynamic range. They have loud parts and they have quiet parts. And a lot of times the best songs have really loud parts and they have really quiet parts and they have fast parts and they have slow parts. You think about something, to take a crazy example, something like Bohemian Rhapsody, which is one of the most famous songs of the last century. It starts off really slow, Mama, I killed a man, and then you've got like the really fast part of Mamma Mia, and like it's just this crescendo, and it's got kind of a little bit of everything. But it's more than just talking about variety in music. It's filling out that dynamic range from the slow parts to the fast parts, the quiet parts to the loud parts. And so I started thinking about the idea of dynamic range in terms of everything, and in particular in terms of storytelling. And I realized that I think what I tend to do sometimes, and I think what a lot of beginner filmmakers do, is they want to say something in a film, and so they kind of tend to make it one note. Everything that happens as a character is just terrible, or everything in the story is happy and funny. But inserting a dynamic range in there can help to add some spice to your story and make it a little more interesting and keep the audience's engagement. Thinking about a story that I think is amazing is The Last of Us. It's a video game that's set in this post-apocalyptic world with zombies, but it's a really great story, and there's a lot of action and horror and violence, but some of the most famous and popular moments in the movie are the quiet in-between moments where the characters get to stop and admire something beautiful, or there's a scene where they pet these giraffes that walk by, and it's just this beautiful little moment of quiet between all the chaos. And a lot of movies do that really well. One of the most emotionally devastating movies I've seen is Beautiful by Alejandro Iñárritu, starring Javier Bardem. And it's just this emotionally draining film where it's almost like a modern day Job story, right? Where this character just goes through one bad thing after another, after another, after another. And by the end of it, you just feel dead inside. I haven't seen it again. I think it's an amazing movie, but I haven't picked up the courage to watch it again. But even in a movie that's so sad and depressing like that, there's these little vignettes of pure delight where the character laughs with his children or admires something beautiful. And you really need that, because in the same way with the visuals of a film, with the difference between light and dark, if all you see is this little window of darkness, right, from very dark to a little dark, you don't really know how dark it is until you see the light. And then you can admire that full scope. Does that make sense? I'm kind of rambling, but I've started to think about that while I'm writing a story, and this plays into pacing as well, which is really important. But just thinking of, like, boy, I've put this character through a lot lately. I wonder if I could insert a little moment here of beauty and of respite in their lives. Or if you're making a romantic comedy, maybe putting in a little moment that reminds the audience that these are just real people and that they're not perfect and polished and beautiful, and that their lives aren't just incredible, but like that there's little moments of humanity and of relatability that draws your audience in and makes the movie a little more believable. Whatever genre you're playing into, if you are doing a genre film, try to think about what the opposite of that looks like, or what the tonal opposite is to the extreme of that genre. You know, if it's a thriller, then those moments of quiet and peacefulness. If it's a horror, then those moments of openness, you know, where they're out of a claustrophobic space, where they're just out in the open and not fearful, right? Like just having that full scope of everything happen. And I think that a part of that is often just taking your character to those extremes, right? Full dynamic range, very sad and very happy. We often feel bad for our characters. We love them so much. We've developed them, we've worked with them, and we don't want them to go through anything too bad. But that's part of what makes a story remarkable and amazing, is seeing a character taken to their absolute limits and to come out on top, or to falter and fall under those limits and you know, express something about human fallibility. But if you just keep your story within this little range here of, like, you know, pretty happy to pretty sad, there's just you're not expressing that much about the human condition. So that was just a quick little thought that I had. I hope it's been helpful, and hope you can use that concept of dynamic range in your own story. And I'd encourage you to look for the idea of dynamic range in everything. So I hope that makes sense. Hope that was helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay sharp.